Hi, I'm Matthew Schwartz with Information Security Media Group, and it's my pleasure to welcome to the ISMG studio Gurps Khaira, the Agile Program Manager for Global Cybersecurity Implementations at HSBC. Gurps, thank you so much for being here today.
Thank you, Matthew. Thank you for having me.
It's my pleasure. We're going to be talking change management, and I'll just preface that by saying there's a whole lot of cybersecurity concern today in terms of defending an organization, making sure you have the right tools and processes in place and that people are using them effectively. And I see change management as always being so required, but now being more required than ever to deliver on what cybersecurity needs to be providing. Which brings me to my first question for you. How does an organization build an effective change management program? How do you break it down even?
Yeah, thank you, Matthew. It's a great question. I think I've been in the banking industry now 15, 17 plus years or so, and deploying change, within cybersecurity. And I've sort of learned quite a few sort of patterns that have occurred, in that time, and put together a methodology of principles that I've learned, which I call the 4D method. And the 4D method, I have applied it on many, many project deliveries. And then I've also taken it into my personal life. And I think we were speaking offline about, my bodybuilding and fitness modeling background. So I've applied the same principles into fitness modeling and bodybuilding, as well as also property and the construction industry. And so it's kind of like a proven, tried and tested, proven methodology that I've been using, for many, many years now. And I've found it to be the most successful. And that is, the 4Ds. Firstly, you have to put your imaginary 4D glasses on, right? It's the first one is define. The second one is, the first one is decide, make the decision, then define, then do, and then done. And so in the first phase where you're defining, this is, what is the change of that you're trying to implement? Is it you're trying to uplift that cybersecurity control within your organization? Is it perhaps you're trying to get your physique leaner, or is it, you're trying to buy your first property? So you're just defining what that change is, and deciding initially what that change is. Then you move into the second phase, which is defining it. And this is where you start putting together your project backlog, and which is a to-do list basically of everything that you think would need to be done in order to deliver that initial decision.
Everything and every person as well that
Absolutely.
You're going to need to kind of touch?
Yes, yeah. So when you start putting together the backlog, you also need to identify who the owners are that are going to help you deliver that action or activity. And then you start identifying the dependencies that you have on those different teams. And then, costs as well, right? Like those people are going to charge you for their time, or, our employees and colleagues will also have a billing system that they have to bill to. So you start putting, you start defining that project or program plan. You start defining those dependencies. You start baselining and defining the scope as well of the project. And also, the critically is the key risks and issues as well of that project, whether they be risks to the finances, risks to schedules, risk to the technical implementation itself. So you start basically defining that in that second phase. And then in the third phase, it's, talk less, do more. It's get on with it, right? The third phase is do. Like just get on with it, execute the change, start delivering those actions that have already been defined. And then, this is where the different methodologies, delivery methodologies come in, where, organizations are either using the agile delivery framework, the waterfall methodology, or, a hybrid these days as well. So it's whatever that methodology is, and you just keep doing, and keep going until that entire project backlog is delivered, and that scope has been delivered as well. And then the last phase is done, with a question mark, like, is it done? This is where, your lessons learned come in. You go through all your actions and your backlog and make sure that's all delivered, as well as, the actions closure checklist. So you're just making sure, all your actions are delivered, all your artifacts have been documented and delivered as well, so that, if you were to deploy this project again, how could we do it quicker, better, faster, stronger, right? So that 4D method for me has been, absolutely the common denominator between delivering change in in cybersecurity, in fitness modeling, or in the property and construction industry.
I imagine that distilling the steps required and the pieces of each step required is the result of some blood, sweat, and tears over the course of your experience, including your work experience. Talk to me a little bit, if you will, about how this was born and also some of the challenges along the way. I mean, it's great to have a system and to have a theory, but obviously when you put it into practice, there can be some issues. Although I assume that this system is meant to help manage those issues.
Yeah, absolutely, Matthew. I think, absolutely the lessons have come from a lot of blood, sweat and tears and a lot of failed projects as well. Like, I'm not going to sit here saying that, every project I've deployed has been a success.
Have you ever met a change manager who has 100% success rate? And would you believe it if they did?
If you meet them, let me know, because I'm hiring. So, I think that sort of unicorn doesn't exist. The principles I'm sharing are built on blood, sweat, and tears and a lot of projects that I've had fail. And as I mentioned, I'm not going to sit here and talk about just all the successes, because, it's in those, I guess, you could call them failures, but for me, there's almost no such thing as failure, right?
Yes. I mean, as in life.
Exactly. Yes, exactly. And so, it's your interpretation of what you deem to be success or failure, right? So using those failed projects, like, that's where I've then, developed my lessons and captured my lessons learned, right? And in that lessons learned, I've thought about, what would I stop doing? What would I start doing? And what would I keep doing if I were to deploy that change or that project again? And one of the key sort of patterns that I found was, the dependencies on the teams that are going to help you deliver that project not being engaged early on enough. So, when we have that initial defining phase and we know who we are dependent on, let's get them involved very early on day one of the project, get them involved into those governance meetings, and, make sure they are fully involved and fully engaged throughout the entire life cycle of that project. And that's where I found, where I've had projects trending to be more and more successful as my career has gone on, is where I've involved those dependent teams very, very early on.
So that's a red flag for you. If you don't have that level of engagement, I won't say you necessarily call the project off, but perhaps it's trying to surge resources toward making that happen before you attempt to move forward.
Exactly. Yes. I mean, if you get, and this never happens, but if you get every phase right, within the 4D method, you'd almost end up with the perfect project. But it's always very clunky. It's always, very messy. Sometimes, stakeholders don't get identified till perhaps you're well into execution or even, closer to closure, because, very often a project has never been delivered before, right? So you don't know what you don't know. So where those teams have come in very late into the project, that either extends the life cycle or life schedule of the project, or it can impact also, the budget and a resource element of the project as well. So, if you can, again, in that defining phase, identify those dependencies very early on, and then, put the costs associated with those as well. And, then either get hiring to help resource those projects and get them delivered.
Fantastic. So many nuances here. My final question for you. I know that obviously having a project team, change management team, there are personalities involved, interfacing with the rest of the organization. I presume you can't carry around a big stick and say, do what I say. There's an element of convincing people to do the right thing. Any secrets there when it comes to managing people who are putting, the human nature is to put the brakes on, right? I don't want to change. Sometimes there can be big egos in the room. Is there a guiding principle that you apply in these situations?
Yeah, absolutely, Matthew. I think, being in the financial services industry most of my career, follow the process, follow the governance process and follow that change management process. And what I mean by that is when you have these egos on a call or in one of your project meetings, don't let that person or that ego overtake your meeting and your time, because very often, other people are on calls as well. So you've got to be appreciative and value the time of the other stakeholders as well. And so, lead that meeting, command that meeting, and stick to the agenda, stick to the process, let the person, have their say or their vent, because they may also be raising a valid risk or concern, right? But then you capture that into your actions and your meeting minutes, and then you take that action offline. So that's what I mean by the process is stick to the governance process, stick to a strict agenda, make sure that agenda has obviously been prepared, before the meeting, so everyone knows how long their speaking slots are going to be, and then capture the meeting minutes and the actions. And I know this sounds very basic, but it's often the basics that get missed. And again, I'm focusing on these basics because they're very simple, but they're the ones that get missed. And I believe that actions and minutes are almost the absolute foundations of delivering change, right? And it doesn't matter whether that change is in the corporate cybersecurity world, in the fitness modeling or bodybuilding world, or in the property and construction world, right?
Yep.
It's all about action and capturing those and holding people accountable.
And breaking it down into bite-sized, manageable,
100%.
executable, understandable chunks.
100%, yeah. And it's just reminded me of one of my favorite quotes, Matthew, if I can share that.
Of course.
It's from one of my favorite books, which is the greatest salesman in the world, which is, no map, however carefully executed to detail, carried its owner over even 1 inch of ground. Action alone is the tinder that ignites the flame. Act now. We must take action.
Fantastic. Gurps, thank you so much for your time and for your insights today.
Matthew, it's been a pleasure. Thank you very much.
I've been speaking with Gurps Khaira of HSBC. I'm Matthew Schwartz with ISMG. Thank you for joining us.